Hello, and welcome to the Citizen Developer, where I will help you build low-code automation on ServiceNow. Today, we're going to revisit the recording that I released on approvals. That was released 3 years ago, has tons of views, so thank you for watching. A lot has changed since then, and I wanted to refresh it because I got some comments about the background music, and I thought of some new ways I wanted to show you how approvals work in ServiceNow. So let's get started. So this use case is if an employee needs to make travel arrangements and it's outside the bounds of the normal travel policy, they need to make an exception request. This exception request gets submitted, and once submitted, the manager needs to approve the exception. If the manager approves the exception, then they can create a ticket to the travel agency to schedule the travel. If it gets rejected, let the submitter know that their travel exception request has been rejected. Okay, here I'm at the basic workspace. This is where the travel exception requests get processed. If you notice here, it's poised to be populated and completed. It looks like we have an approvers tab, which is empty as expected. And we have tickets, empty as expected. This is where the automation will occur, that when a travel exception request gets created, and the approval will go out, and if approved, the ticket will get created. So we're going to come back to this workspace. Okay, now that we have the requirement and the use case figured out, let's talk about building the automation. I'm going to take us to the Flow Designer to do this. I'm just clicking on the All button here in the navigator, and I'm going to use our search capability to find the Flow Designer. Okay, so this is new. Here's where we're going to get our first look at NowAssist when it comes to making automation. We have generative AI capabilities embedded across the platform with NowAssist. It's like we have superpowers. That's what I like to call them when it comes to doing platform administration. Right here, I'm going to show you how to use NowAssist for Creator to help me build this workflow. So if I click on New Flow, now I have a prompt to build with NowAssist. Describe what you want your flow to do, and AI-powered NowAssist will build it for you. Super cool. So let's go ahead and start with the name here. We're going to do travel exception approval workflow. All right, that should work. Here's the fun part. Describe what you would like for it to do. I'm just going to quickly call out here that prompting is so important when trying to get the results you're looking for. The better the prompt, the better the result. So I prepared a prompt here that we will read together. It says, create an approval for the submitter's manager when a new travel exception request is submitted. If approved, create a ticket to the travel agency for them to book the travel. If it is rejected, send a rejection email to the submitter. That's our requirement, right? I just re-articulated our requirement into the NowAssist. Let's see what it does for us. And voila. Okay, let's take a look at this and we'll unpack it just a little bit. Looks like we have the workflow built out. We have a trigger here. It's like a travel request gets created. Yes, I need that. First step, ask for an approval. So now we're going to get an approval going out. And then now if, this is the if, approved, create a task, else send an email. So it generated a fantastic scaffolding, a starting point, a wireframe, whatever you want to call it, for me to build out the automation necessary to complete this workflow. You see, typically when we get requirements like that, we need to think of how to generate that workflow using Flow Designer and your automation capabilities. Here, it really accelerated that. I probably would have ended up here or something very much like it on my own with a little time, but that saves so much time because this framework for this approval requirement is right on. Okay, so that's NowAssist for Creator. However, I'm going to build this from scratch for a couple of reasons. One, some of you may not have this generative AI embedded on your platform yet. Second, we're also going to build these from scratch, which will help you learn a little bit more along the way. Okay, I'm going to leave this one in place, and now let's go ahead and build one from scratch. Click on New Flow. Instead of build with NowAssist, I will build from scratch. And we'll call it Travel Exception Approval from scratch. Okay. It's just a description this time. It will not do any generative AI activities for me there. Okay. So here I have a very empty canvas to build my automation to meet my requirements. So the first one is going to be add a trigger. Our trigger record is really what launches the workflow. It's the thing that's going to make the workflow kick off. And it has some categories here. A record. So under record, if a record gets created, updated, and so forth, that will launch the trigger. This is super helpful. Schedule. Say you want some automation to occur on any one of these periods. This is the way to start that. And then this can be generated from other applications across the platform. If you look at this list, you can tell there's even more power to launch automation on ServiceNow. We're going to use record and record created. So to explain that is that when a travel exception request gets created, run this workflow. That's what we want to do. So it's saying when what kind of record gets created. I just gave us the answer. When a travel exception request gets created. So I have a custom table there that I created when I built my app. That's all I want. You can add additional criteria to make different routing. If you just click on add filters here, you'll notice you have access to all the fields available on your travel exception request table, and you can run conditions against that. But that's all we're going to do for now. We're keeping it simple so you can see how to build a workflow. Now here's the second thing that's super cool with NowAssist for Creator. If you notice here, we have recommendations going on here. So this icon means your generative AI NowAssist for Creator is activated in your workflow. So if you see here, it's offering things that you could do. Create a record, create a task, look up a record. So it's trying to help you out, trying to anticipate what you might need. The first thing we're going to do though is ask for an approval. If I toggle back to this tab, you'll notice that's the first step that's happening. So here's another good use for letting generative AI build your workflow framework. You can actually reference it as a model. Now granted, you can do all the changes in here. Well, let's move on. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is ask for an approval. So we can click on add action here. And we have all the actions to choose from. Now the cool thing is that we organize them alphabetically and by scope or application, which I can explain a little bit for you here. But if you go to ServiceNow Core, these are all the automations that you can do on the platform using Flow Designer. And I say all loosely because there's even more ways to automate. But they're alphabetical here and ask for approvals at the top. So let's go ahead and run with that. So now that we have the ask for approval inside our workflow, we need to configure it. First thing it's wondering is like, what do you want to approve? I want to approve this travel exception request. So you can say where it's actually helping you drag and drop the record data pill. So if I kind of come over here, our trigger record, the one that got created, the one that's launching this workflow, is sitting right here in this data pill. In this whole data frame, you're going to have continued access to all the data elements that are making up this workflow. And I'm actually going to help us double click into that momentarily to see even more powerful capabilities. I'm just going to grab this record though for now and drop it here. Once I drop that record in here, it auto-populated these three fields. Now these three fields are important. This is the table name, so it knew what table it was. This table name will match this table in this circumstance. And these two fields are fields that will automatically get updated when the approval gets, there's a response to the approval. So if it gets approved, rejected, and so forth, these two fields get updated. These two fields happen to also reside on this table. So essentially, it's auto-populating a couple of fields on the parent table. If you were to build another table from scratch, well, let's not get into that. Moving forward. So next, we have the approval rules. Approve when, and now we have an approval rule that we can use. So if I hit that drop down here, we have anyone approves, all users approve, all responded and anyone approves, percentage and number. So these, when it means anyone, it's like any of the one that you ask for an approval. All these mean that, of the people you ask to approve. So let me go ahead and click on anyone. And here you have a blank field. What goes here? Well, you have the chance to decide who your approver is going to be, and that's where that goes. So we can give you some options here. You can add a user. The thing about a user is that it's not very scalable, because what if that person is out, or they change jobs, or they leave the company? Your workflow won't work anymore. The second one is here, these groups. This is very helpful because you can build approval groups across the platform and take advantage of those groups. And so that can go out to several people. For example, this cab approval group has about 5 people in it. Alternately, you can dynamically populate it, because if you remember the requirement, it is the submitter's manager who needs to approve the travel exception. So how do we put the approver's manager in here? Well, let's take a look. So there's 2 cool ways. I'm going to go through both of them. So the first one is back to the data section. On the travel exception request record, you have access to all the data within that record. So you can expand it with this triangle here. Once it's expanded, you can navigate through here, and now you notice you see all the fields available from that record. A lot of valuable information here. We want to go to the person that opened it. Opened by. As you get comfortable and used to the platform, you'll recognize opened by is going to be used in scenarios like this very frequently. So we have opened by here. Well, I want the open by's manager to be the approver. So now I can actually open and drill into the opened by person by clicking that triangle. So what I've just did is dot walked from one data model to another data model. First, I went to the record of the travel exception request. I saw who opened it, and now I'm going into their fields and that information. And within that information, we have their manager. Here it is. So I can drop the manager here. So what we have now is we have dynamically populated the who is going to approve with the open by's manager. So that makes this workflow scalable. Essentially, as long as the person that's making the submission has a manager in their, in their profile, that's who will get it. So it's very, very scalable. So we'll stop there. I'm going to leave cab approval in here for testing purposes. So let's say I'm done. All right, so we got 2 steps. We're when we launched the trigger and we've asked for the approval. So let's run with the if statements just to keep things flowing. I'm going to pick up the pace here because this is more about the approval lifecycle than it is so much about the additional automation that we can do. So let's pick up the pace in this segment. So if you notice here, NowAssist is recommending an if statement. That's exactly what I need. Thank you, NowAssist. Now say if approved. So here's my condition here. Again, see my approval step. These are in steps. My approval step has some data elements that I can leverage, and one of them is the approval state. That's what I need there. Because the condition is when the approval state is approved, then this condition is met. That easy. So now, if it's approved, look what recommendations is create a record. That's what we need. But send a notification, send an email. I mean, it knows that I need a record somehow. So I'm going to click on create a record. And in my requirement, I used a ticket. We have just an out-of-the-box table here that we can leverage, and it's called a ticket. I'm going to use that one. Okay. When you're making child tasks that are referencing a parent workflow, I always like to add the parent field populated first thing. So this ticket field has a parent field. So this ticket table has a parent field in it. And I want the parent to be our initiating record. Now, let me help you make a quick connection. If I go back to our workspace here, the ticket that gets generated, we want it to appear in association with the parent workflow. That is why I populated the parent field. So that way, when this occurs, what will happen is, see that parent field is populated? That's what we want to happen automatically. So that way you have your associated ticket here. That's what we're building. Let's go back. Okay, so the parent field is populated. And I'm just going to do a short description just for the sake of moving forward and saying, please book the travel. That's what we said the requirement was. Travel agency is going to do this. Now you could do assignment group here, and we can make sure the assignment group is the travel group. Now granted, I will mention I don't have that assignment group in this demo, so I'm going to skip that. We can still run test. All right. So I like that so far. I'm going to save as I go along. So that's all I want to do at that point. Now I'm going to move on down here. Let's see, it's got the else if. See, that's what I wanted because they know I'm doing an if. I want to do an else if. So that's really, really cool. And let me make sure that we have just an else. So I'm just going to do the else because this is it. It's approved or rejected. I don't need another if. So let's just go ahead and do else. Okay. So now what do I want to do? So this time it's making some recommendations, but my requirement is I want to send an email to the submitter. So I'm just going to click on this little add action here. Again, you have actions to do, and I'm going to click on action, and I'm going to type out email. So instead of looking through the list, I can actually use the search. And so it says send email. That's what I want. Select target record. I do want to associate this email with this record, so I'm going to bring that in here. Auto populates the table like I always wanted to. Include the watermark. Keep that checked. That needs its own video, I would think. And who's going to get this? So I'm going to teach you another way to populate these fields other than the drag and drop. We want this to go to the submitter. So this is how you can dot walk like I did with the data pill selector. By expanding, I'm going to show you how to do it with this icon here. So if I click on data pill picker, I'm going to click on there. Now I have access to the data that's on the right hand side, but in this format. So I want to go into the trigger record. And now I have the travel exception record here. Now you see the little arrow that gives me the chance to drill into the data on that record. So I want that. And then from here, I want to pick the person who opened it, right? So I should be able to like start to type up here, and it shortens the list. Or you can scroll. I want to go to open by. But not just open by. I'm going to drill in one extra step just to kind of be certain I get to their email address. So this field is populated with their email address. So I'm just going to send it to the email address. I really do think if I put the person in there, the opened by field, it still would have gotten to their email. I just took it a step further. Little call out here, prerequisite. You got to have an email address in your user profile or this will fail. Okay, moving forward. Subject, your request was rejected. Sorry. Okay, so now we have an email going out. Save as we go. And now we're ready to test. Okay, so if we're ready to test, we need a record to test against. So I already made a ticket here, so I don't want to confuse things. I think I'm going to make a brand new travel exception request and just say Jamaica for a workshop. Okay, so the automation is not activated yet. I'm just creating a record. Okay, nothing happened magically just yet. I want to test it first and then I'll activate it. Then the automation will occur. So it's just, I have 1002. So if you go to back to the automation, you click on test and you get to pick a record in which to run the test against. And I want to run it against the one I just created. And we're going to run the test. So what it's going to do is it's going to emulate the conditions being met to launch the flow. So let's take a look at the details here first. So what it's telling me here, if I'm looking at this execution details, this is a refresh flow data. It has me in waiting mode. And that is because it already passed this one, but right now it asked for the approval and it's just waiting there because it can't proceed with the automation until the approval gets a response. So let's go back to our workspace for this 1002. If I go to approvers, I have 2 approvers now. So if you notice here, it's approving travel exception requests. So that auto-populated. So that test has launched this, has automated the approval requests. And there's more than one place to approve these. These managers or these leaders or whoever's got the ability to approve can do this from the mobile experience. They can do it from this interface. They can do it from our portals. I'll have to show that more to you. But right now, we're just looking at the automation progress. So let's go take a look at it. This is the approval record. I'm just going to click into it. And it's trying to give me as much information. I'll say, okay, this is fine. And I can move this to approved. Okay, little manual. And the reason I can get to this, even though I'm not Caleb, is because I'm operating as an admin. This is for testing purposes, but this is what Caleb could do to approve. So I'm approving this as Caleb. All right. Let me go back to details. So if you notice here, it says approved and no longer required. That's because of the rule we set, if anyone approves. So that's why that's behaving like that. So let's see if it made our ticket. All right. So we have a ticket 1002 that got created. Please book the travel. So this automation, because it was approved, went ahead and made a ticket to the travel agent to book the travel. Very cool. Travel agent can come through here, close things out. All right, so that worked. I'm going back to the flow designer. Because that worked, let me go ahead and refresh this. Since we're in our test results, let's refresh this. All right, so you see this results here. If anything went wrong, information would be here to help you troubleshoot. I'm gonna close this. cancel that test. We're done testing. And now I want to activate this. And what activate means is that from now on, if I go create a new travel exception request record, this automation will occur automatically like we expect it to. So let's put that to the test. Travel to Orlando for K23. That's last year's knowledge. I think it was in Orlando. I didn't go. Okay, so now that I've saved it, if that flow is activated, the approvers should already be there. Yeah. And I'm going to go in as Caleb one more time and just emulate the approval. I really wish I could show you the other interfaces to do this, but this video is getting long. So let's keep trucking. And that's done. And we have the ticket. So all the automation occurred outside of testing mode. This is like in production now. This is a working automation. So other than that, I just really want to call out the power of the NowAssist and the generative AI. And you also have the flow recommendations that we saw throughout building this process, and how much more helpful and powerful it can be to enable low coders, citizen developers, builders, or even seasoned developers be more productive. So I hope this basic approval workflow that we built today was helpful for you and helps you continue to keep on low coding. Thanks.